he wants a 10 as well, and we're aiming for 25 minutes each. So here's your 10. Visible enough?
But I'm so how much?
So it'll go 3 over. Why don't we do time to 25? And then we'll do the rest again.
Can someone relieve you?
Excellent. So you're here or nearby? Okay, great.
Who was in the registration room?
Nope. Yeah, and then it's outside, and there's, I was supposed to be there till like now, and nobody's in there yet, so there's nobody in there when you left.
And you know what we're doing
Sorry, we didn't
No,
Yeah, Laura was supposed to be in there.
normal person
Right, Claire. So Claire and Jonathan are supposed to be there. Jonathan's just starting a video, so it should be okay. Let me just double check.
yeah, I mean, it's not like hopping it or anything.
Yes, he's someone else. There's your 10 on there too. Yes, 10, 5, 6, 1.
almost like renting a place. Yeah, when did that start?
Yeah.
Video? For the PowerPoint. Hey, it's Nancy from the party.
Yeah, we're downtown. It's about 200.
I know. Someday I'll hear
Yeah, I mean, it's
I saw you had a position for like
8 minutes, maybe definitely less than 10 minutes to walk from the apartment, like to get home.
So now I'm doing this.
Southwest 11 near Cruelty.
And I saw when did that happen?
Area.
It's amazing. So I'm so glad. So all they want to cover.
Okay, I think we're probably in the same area. Yeah, I don't really know how
So you can say whichever one. I think that's what I'm doing. But at the very least, you can just go back to the side. Make sure I'll all be there. The ones that from 360 should be. Some of them, we just switched it up or something. Because it's technically their job. Except for like
So the money, you send the money to the company?
sometimes. Oh, yeah. Some people like, which is fun, I guess. It's really bad.
I mean, I just need to like keep happy. Yeah, he's happy with that.
Welcome to this amazing panel that we are about to experience. My name is Nancy Perry, and I'm the overseer of government relations at the ASPCA, and I have the very distinct honor of being able to moderate this panel that will cover some truly amazing and really groundbreaking work that has happened in other countries. So I'm glad that you're here to share this. Our speakers could not be more fabulous, and I will tell you a little bit about each of them now. You will see what I mean. First, we have Heron Gordijo. I'm not sure if I'm saying that correctly, but I'm doing my best. Heron is a scholar in both animal and environmental law, with many published articles and books in both areas. He earned his SJD at the Federal University of Pernambuco, his postdoctorate at Pace University Law School. He is an environmental public prosecutor in Brazil. He's the coordinator of master's and PhD work for Universidade Federal da Bahia. He is the regional coordinator of Brazil American Institute for Environmental Law at Pace University. He's a professor of animal law and society at Universidad Autónoma de Barcelona in Spain. He's the founder and president of the Abolitionist Institute for Animals. He's the editor of the Brazilian Animal Rights Review. And, if that's not enough, he's the founder and president of the Latin American Animal Law Association. I don't know if he ever sleeps, but he is truly an accomplished and amazing speaker. And he will be speaking first, but I will introduce Kartik now, before we get going. Well, actually, I think I'll wait and introduce Kartik when he's about to come up. So, Heron, would you like to come take the stage? Thank you so much.
Good morning, everyone. I'd like to thank to Nancy Perry and Professor Natasha for the invitation, Professor Kathy Hasley, and all the professors here in Lewis and Clark University. I'm so glad to be here, and I'd like to talk to you about the Brazilian experience as a professor and as a prosecutor, environmental prosecutor in Brazil. Can you hear me well? It's okay?
Yes, I think so. Everyone can hear? Great.
Brazil is a country, it's a tropical country, and they're one of the most important rainforests in the world, the Amazon rainforest. The Amazon rainforest have a very important participation in give the oxygen for the world. The forest kept the green gas effect and give oxygen for the planet. It's very important. And Amazon produced almost 20% of the oxygen to the planet. The biodiversity in the Amazon is very important. I don't know, I'm not feeling well to stay so static, just like here, because I'm a professor and I talk, walking all the time.
You can use the remote control if you like and walk.
I have a control.
Yes.
But okay.
There you go. Oh, no, that's for the PowerPoint. Yes.
It's
So
for the PowerPoint.
The problem would be the
Okay.
microphone. Perhaps we can pull one of these mics and allow you to move.
Okay.
Probably hear
I'm sure, but I think we're live streaming, so I think there's a
Well, these
technical...
mics get the live streams.
Oh, so you don't need to even hold the microphone. Fabulous.
Okay.
And you don't need to hold anything. You'll be
Okay.
fine.
Okay.
Thank you.
Um,
Here's your water. I'm sorry.
and the biodiversity in Amazon is very important because one among the animals in the world live in Amazon, wildlife. It's a very important forest. One in 5 birds live in Amazon. It's a very important biodiversity in the Amazon rainforest. This is the character of the Brazil. Brazil probably is the most green country in the world. 50% of the Brazilian territory is Amazon. But now we have some problems with deforestation. The same problem here in Oregon. A big forest and people are living there. The increase of population, and the most important problem is the deforestation to pasture for cattle. This is horrible to Brazil, to the Amazon rainforest, and to the world too. This is the second most important forest in Brazil. This is the Atlantic forest. I live here in Salvador, like just right here. I grew up in this forest, near the forest. But now it's just building and urban population. Just 12% of the Atlantic forest remain in Brazil. So the Brazilian population is concentrated here in the coast. So for this reason, 88% of the original forest habitat has been lost. Replaced by pastures, croplands, and urban areas. Well, after this introduction, I'd like to talk about this is my specialty. What is this legal status of the animals? This is my subject of research. I've been taken with this for a long time. In Brazil, the legal status of the wildlife changing since 1970 until the new constitution 1988 in Brazil. In the beginning, the civil code said that wildlife is a res nullium. It's a German influence. The civil code of German. Who is it? Res nullium is everything we put in the this is the Brazilian, the former civil code in Brazil. Wildlife are things without honor are subject to appropriation. Wild animals were delivered to their natural freedom, detained and domesticated that are not marked, if they have lost the ability to return to the place where they used to share, except in the hypothesis of the Article 596, when the owners are in search of the animal. This is a German influence. Everybody can take the wildlife in Brazil. In 1967, the Brazil changed the legal status of wildlife. First, a res nullium, but now, for influence of this Italian civil code, the wildlife will be considered state property. State property. For this reason, is there a very important global pressure to Brazil, and Brazil discovered the importance of its biodiversity. The civil code changed the legal status of the wildlife. And the debate in Brazil will be if the state is the property, is the owner of the wildlife, and the question is who must to protect this wildlife? The state, the union, Brazil is like the United States is a federation, or the member states? I'm a state prosecutor. And the Supreme Court in Brazil decided that the union, the state in this case, is the state union. For this reason, the federal justice begin to protect, to judge these cases when wildlife is involved. Okay, and for a long time, this is a decision, a precedent, important precedent in Brazilian Superior Court. Brazil have 4 instances. The first, the tribunal, the Superior Court protect the federal law, and the Supreme Court, the constitutional law. And the Superior Court decide that state, in this case, in the law, state can authorize it. In this case, is the state union. So the protection for an animal was responsibility to the federal courts in Brazil. Fishing is difficult, and we have to understand that the legal state of animal is very crazy. The domestic animals are property, and wildlife are state property. It's the same. But it's difficult to understand this status because we are schizophrenic with the morally. We love some animals and we kill others. In India, the cow is sacred, yeah? And some people eat dogs. In Brazil, the dogs and the cats are sacred, and we eat cow meat, okay? It's a cultural difference. But it's very difficult to put one legal status for all the animals. big old problem. Fishing. Fishing. It's impossible to everybody ask to state a permission, authorization to fish. And the fish is a wildlife too. The dolphins in 1807, the criminal environmental criminal law protect the dolphins and whales and river dolphins in Brazilian waters. But in 1988, the Brazil enacted a new constitution. Say that animals are assets of common use of people. Similar to public trust doctrine here in the United States. It's not state property, it's not res nullium, but now is the common use of people, like the seer, is a square, can belong to all members of community in equal conditions. Begin to be state property for one another way. In Brazil is common use of people asset. In the Article 225, the new constitution in Brazil said, government must protect fauna and flora with prohibition in the manner prescribed by law of all practices which represent a risk of their ecological function, cause extinction of species, or subject animals to cruelty. Very interesting. This constitution is very progressive. But I ask you, it's a real enforcement for this article in Constitution. And the Environmental Law, or Environmental Crimes Act, it's a crime to take, pursue, hunt, catch the wildlife. Penalty, detention, prison of 6 months to 1 year, and fine. To kill wildlife, just wildlife. Why they don't kill domestic animals? Why? Because the cow, because the pigs, because the chicken. You can kill one, and you. For this reason, if you kill a cat or a dog in one bit, just a bit, it's not a crime. The crime is to be cruel by domestic animal. You must be cruel. You have to shot, you have to eat after the animals die. Excuse me, but I forgot. I changed my presentation. We don't have the Article 32 in Environmental Criminal Act of the Brazilian criminal law. Fishing, the same problem. To fish during periods in which fish is prohibited or place forbidden by the competent agency, it's a crime too. And fishing with explosives is very common in Brazil. There are very big coast. Well, I will begin the comparison. People say about the changement of the legal status of animals. And we compare with the problem of the black people, the Jew people, or the Holocaust. my director of my thesis, my PhD in Brazil is a German, PhD in University of Berlin. And when I was writing my thesis, I made a comparison between the animal condition with the Holocaust, they say. He said, no. Jew people don't love Jew, this comparison. Black people don't love Jew. I don't have this problem. I love to be compared by the great apes. People say to me when I sue an habeas corpus for a chimpanzee that I'm the monkey prosecutor. The prosecutor of the monkey. It's real. Everybody is a monk. Oh, I'll say John Lennon. Everybody got something to hide except for me and my monk. The monkey is the unconscious or subconscious in our mind. Okay? And we all are monkey. Richard Dark said, if you take the hands of your mother take the hands of your grandmother take the hands of your grandmother, in 500 meters you will find a chimpanzee. So, I used to compare the situation with the legal entity theory. Because the legal subject is the strong struggle to fight, to change the animal legal status. Indeed, for this reason, I compare it with the legal person entity. For example, here in the United States, a sheep is a legal subject. This university is a legal subject. The difference of the professors, director, is a distinct and different, is another legal person. Why not the chimpanzee, who share with us 1994% of the genetic code? Why not? It is just a decision. It is a judicialization. Who is legal subject? Who the law say is you are the legal subject? If the law say this microphone is a legal subject, this will be a legal subject. The interpretation, the legal entity theory begin with Pope Innocent IV. To do not permit the monkey take the territory of the church, and for responsibility. For this reason, I sue an habeas corpus in favor of this chimpanzee 10 years ago, and the judge accepted the habeas corpus. The first animal in the world who was accepted in a court as a legal subject. And the judge said, it's well known that the criminal rights to due process is not static, but rather subject to constant change, where new decision must be adapted to modern times. I believe that with the death of Suiza, at the end the animal died, or was killed, I don't know. This subject will endure a continuous debates, principally in the law school courses. The question? Why animals? For me, I don't know why animals, but I know that chimpanzees, the great apes, are legal subjects because they are humanoids like us, and they share the same future with us. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you so much, Hiram. With no further ado, I will introduce my new friend Kartik. And though he laughs when I say it, his full name is Kartik Satyanarayan. He also has a storied history, and I'm very excited to hear from him. He started his wildlife conservation work when he was in college, working with the tiger ecology research. In 1995, he founded Wildlife SOS. And SOS has had a historic role in changing the planet for wildlife. They took on establishing India's largest bear sanctuary and then rescued more than 600 sloth bears in less than a decade. They literally eliminated the practice, the very brutal practice of bear dancing in the country of India. It's really phenomenal. SOS works now with wildlife enforcement authorities to crack down on wildlife crimes. And Kartik continues to develop his credentials as a member of the Central Zoo Authority, part of the Wildlife Crime Control Bureau. He is an honorary wildlife warden for the Delhi government and member of IUCN Bear Specialist Group. He's also a TED Fellow, and he's been a speaker at the European and British Parliaments. He has spoken at the Royal Geographic Society. He's spoken at the National Zoo in DC, as well as zoos in Miami, Seattle, and San Diego. And now he will speak to us. Thank you.
Thanks very much. It's a real delight to be here. I'm very honored. Let me make sure this thing works.
I think the plug came out.
Oh, thanks for pointing that out.
Something's coming up here.
Oh, there it is. I apologize for that. Excellent. Okay. So, for the purpose of this talk, I'm going to briefly tell you about Wildlife SOS, and I'm going to discuss the challenges on the ground that we have to face in India, and the laws that we primarily use to protect wildlife. So Wildlife SOS was really started by me and a co-founder, Geeta Seshamani, who couldn't make it, unfortunately, but she has been working in the field of animal welfare much before I, and I've been doing this now for about 20 years. So it's very interesting what we do and what we started off. I started off volunteering, as an ambulance driver at night to try and help animals in distress. But much before that, I was able to get my my university vice chancellor in Bangalore to let me do my entire undergraduation from the forest. So I was able to, he actually waived 3 years of my attendance. So that is where my history kind of started. I was in the forest doing a tiger ecological status survey all through my burning midnight oil, studying, and I would come back 8 weeks before my exams and make it happen. So that's what happened. And basically, like the session talks about, it's about protecting wildlife in their habitat. This is how a lot of India looked like, but now there is less than 5% of protected area left in India. So you can imagine there's 95% gone, and even for what's left, there is a lot of fighting, a lot of development challenges, and every day we lose species. The work that Wildlife SOS primarily does, we are very well known for the interventions that we do for human-wildlife conflict. This is a sloth bear that's been trapped by farmers in snares made from automobile cables, motorcycle cables, accelerator cables and brake cables and clutch cables. And so our teams go out in the field and get these animals released and fix them, treat them, and then release them back. Also, we do a lot of work with leopards. We work with several species: tigers, bears, leopards, elephants, reptiles. We have a problem in saying no, so we really do take on more than we should be, and we have to. So these are cubs that end up falling in open wells. We have about 9,000 open wells in rural areas of the state of Maharashtra, and they fall in, so we have to lift them, and we work in pretty primitive conditions in some places. So this is a milk crate that's been used to fish this leopard cub out, and then we fix it, and then we are able to reunite these cubs with their mothers. And we've done about over 50 such incidents. We've been able to do it successfully. Now the laws, the Wildlife Protection Act of India is primarily what we rely on very heavily, and it's a very progressive law. It's amazing that in 1972, way back then, they actually thought of all of these points and made it so progressive. So it's a little bit like the IRS, the onus of, so if you're caught with contraband or an animal in your possession and it's illegal possession, you're presumed to be guilty unless you prove your innocence. So the onus of, the burden of proof is on the accused. So that makes it very much in favor of the problem. So basically it's an incredible law if it's used the right way. But it's not effective if it's not used, implemented well in the field. So conviction can be 3 to 7 years, not less than 3 years, and up to 7 years. Now I think it's gone up to 10 years. But the thing is, we have less than 0.01% conviction rates in India. So those are the challenges that we have. It's a non-bailable offense, technically, but not many people stay in. We have to fight very hard to try and prevent bail. So as you can see, the challenges, it's a very complex law. It's difficult to implement in the field. The field officers, the frontline staff find it hard to understand and manage the situation in the field. It's hard to interpret. Things are very, very, like for example, jaw traps, which are technically illegal. They used to trap tigers, leopards, bears, etc., are illegal, and you can arrest the people and put them in jail only if they are found in the protected area with the jaw trap. But to prove that they are making jaw traps in the city and then they send it in there, you can't stop a jaw trap guy. I mean, it becomes a huge exercise trying to prove anything over there. So lots of legal experimentations are still underway. Ownership of wild animals continues to be a gray area. Elephants, unfortunately, are defined both as wild animals and in the definition of cows, of cattle. So it's a complex situation. Awareness is really low. A lot of the judiciary don't know that it's a special act. So very often we have to go and do a lot of awareness creation, sometimes as little as 10 minutes before the case gets heard. And there's poor infrastructure in the field. So these are the challenges that we kind of have to work with. The other law that we have is sadly even weaker. It's the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act. And it's really an antiquated law, requires a lot of reform, lack of awareness, and the fines can be really pathetic. I mean, it can be less than 15 cents if convicted, and can go up to about $1, a little bit over, I think. And offenders use loopholes, so they actually violate, pay the fine, and then continue to violate. And in some cases, if you paid a fine, you can kind of do the same thing again within a 24-hour period. So it becomes a bit of a problem, and some specifications are very vague. So given this background of what we kind of have to work with in India, I'll give you two case studies, one with bears, and in order to function in a country like India, you cannot just use the law, it just won't help. You'll just be, hitting a brick wall constantly if you only rely on that. You've got to use a multiple multi-layer approaches sometimes. Now this is a sloth bear, for those of you who don't know. It's a very, very severely endangered species found only in the Indian subcontinent. You have a small subspecies population in Sri Lanka, but other than that, you don't have them anywhere else. I think there are 23 individuals in the whole of the United States, all the zoos put together. Now, what we found in 1995, and this was a startling case, was that these bears that were shy, hard to see, you wouldn't see them. You could see a tiger and a leopard in the forest, but it was really hard to see these bears. And they were indigenous communities called Kalandars who were using these bears across the streets. They were basically using them to perform on the streets. And this was despite a law being there in existence, which made it quite severe, in that they could get arrested and that guy could go to jail for 7 years if convicted. So we started investigating this, and we realized that the law was just not enough, because when we started our work in 1995, and eventually in 4 years we realized that it was going to be hard. When we went and spoke with the legal interpreters, the government, the judiciary, it basically was that they were looking away because it was a poor community, it involved minority communities, involved livelihoods, and it was basically hard to implement. How many people could you keep putting in jail? And so this is a Kalandar man with his bear, and that's how his family lives. As you can see, they have no toilets, no drinking water. It's a nomadic existence. The children don't get sent to school at all. And as we dug deeper, we found out that it wasn't a nice situation for the bears either. The demand created by the community was causing hundreds of bears to be poached as cubs from the forest. And poachers would typically kill the mothers, harvest all the parts for use. And cubs like this weigh about 300 grams, and then they get taken to an undercover market. Those are undercover photos of cubs being staked out in a market where they then get sold. So you could go in there pretending to be a buyer, and that's how we learned all this. We had to go in disguised and behave like buyers and pretend to buy some cubs. So we learned the whole we were able to document the whole process of what was being done to these cubs and where they were moving them. Then they would use a red hot iron poker to put a hole through the muzzle. I apologize for this photograph. It's important for you to understand what we had to deal with. And then the muzzle wound would not be allowed to heal. And that was only so the bears would then perform. Now, why was this violation tolerated? Like I explained, it was because it was connected to a livelihood. And so it wasn't possible to just use the law and bring about an intervention. So we had to go about it in a very, very different way than we anticipated. We thought it would, in the presence of such a good law, it would be easy to do it. So I'm going to quickly just go through some information of what we had to do. We had to work with the more intelligent species of the Kalandars, the women. And it really made a difference, because we started trying to, it was a very patriarchal community. The laws that existed for addressing child marriage, things like that, also was being ignored by the community. So we taught them a lot of skills. We had to take on this big problem, even in the society, which was child marriage. Girls were getting married off and they were being 11 and 12 years of age. So that was another issue that we had to tackle in the community itself. We currently support the education of about 1,500 children. So we got all these kids to school, we paid for the school fees, we said, we have to break the cycle, and then we were able to, it took us months to convince the community to actually let us send these kids to school. And then the girls were, as I said, since it was a very patriarchal community, they wouldn't send the girls to school. And so we had to battle that and manage to get the girls in school. So this is a really important day for all these children. The first time they get to touch books and go to school after that. So education for all of the children in the community was really important, because without education they wouldn't even understand what the whole legal implication and the ecological implication of what their community was doing to damage the ecology and the bears. We taught them a lot of skill development. These are girls in the community who wouldn't be able to go to school, but taught them skill developments. We established alternative livelihoods for the community through carpet weaving and things like that. And then finally we managed to get to the men, and that was quite a challenge, because we had the law and we could send all these guys to jail, but how many people could we send to jail? It didn't make sense, and we had to make sure that it was sustained. And if we were able to get these people into another livelihood, then we could ensure that they wouldn't go back, to create more demand, to remove more bears. And so this is Bittu. He surrendered his bear to us, and we helped him set up a bank account. Of course, we made him sign an agreement that he would be sent to jail if he violated this opportunity he got. It was like a casual amnesty, really, but not something that the law allowed for, but the law enforcement officers were happier for us to do this than go and confiscate these animals and arrest these people. Mind you, we had to do a lot of confiscations in order to bring the community to a point where they understood that, okay, the law is serious and we will end up losing everything if we didn't work with these people. So the law was very useful. The Wildlife Protection Act helped us implement this effectively. So this man is now running a cool drink store, like a trucker stop. And this is Sadhuwa, who surrendered his bear. His son worked with us for some time. And then he set up a cattle fodder store. Basically, we gave them the seed funds and trained them how to do that. And this is Amin, who runs an auto rickshaw, or a tuk-tuk as we call them sometimes. And we gave the seed funds and the loan for the bank for him to get that. Now these opportunities, and there's hundreds of stories like this, but each opportunity gives them sustained, non-seasonal, perennial income, whereas the dancing bears would only give them tourist income, a spike of income during the tourist season in India, which was not sufficient to support the family at all. Of course, we also did a few health camps to help the community because they really have no health care whatsoever. There's still children dying, having polio and things like that in the community. Talking about healthcare, what did we do to all the bears that these people were surrendering to us? So it started off with one bear. I'll just tell you about her in a couple of slides later. But we set up this first rehab facility. We didn't really know how we were going to do this because we had the law supporting us, but it was really hard to implement all of this. So we set up the Agra Bear Rescue Facility, and the government was willing to give us some land, so we got some land. And this is a bear that gets received from the Qalandars. We anesthetize the bear, try and remove the rope. Very often the rope is embedded inside the tissue with a thorn or a needle, and the teeth are all broken, of course. They're smashed out with a metal rod, so the handler is not at risk. And we have to fix that. They have a lot of dental issues. We've probably done about 276 root canal surgeries on these bears to try and fix them so far. And then we have to teach these bears to become bears. As you can see, the only memory left is, of course, the scar on the muzzle and what's inside the head. But we have to teach them how to recognize fruit. Many of them don't know fruits are meant to be eaten. They've been kept on a diet of bread and milk for most of their lives. We have to teach them how to climb. Very often they can't climb back down. And we have to teach them how to climb down as well. And yes, they have a great time getting rehabilitated. So during this process, we ended up rescuing bears. Rani was our first bear, and this is how she came in. She weighed about 35 kilograms, and then this is how she looks today. So we rescued 628 bears during this process, and we ended up rehabilitating 3,000 families. But that was just not enough. Making sure the habitat of the bears was also protected was a really crucial thing. So we started buying land, private land. This is the habitat that the bears use. It's rocky outcrops, and you can see two bears over there. Those two black dots that you see are actually bears, and protecting that and doing a lot of afforestation. So about 17 years after we started this work, we looked back, and this is what we'd been able to achieve. We'd actually used the Wildlife Protection Act as an excellent tool, which helped us ensure that you can use it for enforcement, except the implementation was really key about how to use the law. We actually eradicated the whole practice of dancing bears, which was a 400-year-old practice. We estimated it would take us about 50 years to do it, but we were surprised and shocked at ourselves that it was done in 17 years. And of course, we had addressed the social aspect of the Qalandar community. We had empowered women, we had done a community upliftment, healthcare, education, and fixed about 3,000 families' lives. 40% of our staff, we employ about 200 people in India, are from these communities. Here's a quick video I'll share with you. This is a sloth bear being released. So these are conflict bears. Yeah, he's really quick. So conflict bears that we rescue, and then we try and put a radio collar on them and put them back out so we can track them. And but the challenges in the field are just not that. It's all not nice and rosy. We have a lot of poaching that still goes on, not just for Qalandars in Nepal. Nepal is a neighboring country, and they do have dancing bears. We have a lot of body part trafficking with bear cubs, live bear cubs, because bear paw soup, as you know, is a delicacy in some Southeast Asian countries, and bear baiting, which is a blood sport in the northwest frontier province of Pakistan. And so a lot of the bears get smuggled out through the porous borders. And typically, as we get intelligence, this is how our intelligence would work. We'd get a call at about 3 a.m. It always has this way of happening beyond 2 a.m. You have to wake up and run. And we get to the middle of nowhere with the police, who are very cooperative when we request them. And it took us about 20 years to get that level of cooperation. But typically, this is what we'd find, and we uncover the baskets, and you find the cubs, and that's the poacher who was arrested with the cubs. And the police are very supportive and cooperative, and they get a lot of publicity as well, and they deal with blood and gore, blood and murder and rape every single day. So this, I think, is very encouraging for them. This is a rare photograph of a smiling policeman. It's not very common in the badlands of some of our states. It's quite difficult. So going on to the Wildlife Protection Act again, it's helped us rescue over 70 bear cubs from poachers, and we've had a good run. But the business of poaching, as you all know, is a multi-billion-dollar business. It's dirty business, and the porous borders that we have around India don't help at all. And as we gather intelligence, this is some of the intelligence we also get as routine, like jaw traps. This is a tiger in a jaw trap inside a protected area. And you can see the leg is trapped. And this particular incident, somebody heard the tiger roar, tipped off the forest department, so we could get a team out there and rescue the tiger. And of course, it can't be released back. But if we had not, there were other cases where nobody heard about the tiger, and the poachers were in there, so they basically bludgeoned the tiger to death, and in about 40 minutes harvest all of the skin, the bones, the fat, or every single tissue of the tiger basically. And there's other wildlife in trade as well that we get a lot of intelligence to, and we have to work. Pangolins, owls, anything you name it, snakes, frogs, lizards, monitor lizards, etc. are all at risk. So one of the key things that we do is working with poaching communities. So this is a group of reformed poachers that we actually are using to translocate nilgai antelope from the Delhi International Airport. There's about 172 of them that we had to try and move out. So we shifted them, physically capturing each one, because tranquilizing was not only expensive, but also puts the risk of fatality. And we were able to move these animals out. This is how it would go. We would load them up into crates and put a mask over their heads so they wouldn't get tense, and then release them back. This is a hyena being rescued and translocated. Again, conflict situations, as you see, we work in really primitive conditions. We don't even have a stretcher in some situations. We need to get it out there before the mob kills it. Again, a leopard trapped, sadly, was trying to jump over a fence and got impaled. And took us a long time to rescue it. You can also see a live electrical cable right by it. So we could actually feel the electricity on that fence as we were taking the leopard off. Again, 3 a.m. in the morning, it just is unmissable. It always will happen beyond 1 o'clock in the morning. So one of the alternative livelihoods we actually use for these communities is to work with wildlife. So this is again translocating stuff at the airport. One of the training work that we do is we were able to get Zoo Boise in Idaho to fund us. They gave us about a $50,000 grant to develop an enforcement manual to interpret the Wildlife Protection Act, which is very, very complex. So we do a lot of training in the field. I'll quickly run through elephants. This is my case study too. I think I have like 1 minute, 2 minutes left. So pardon me for running through it. As you know, people in India really worship elephants. Sadly, they're abused extensively, and the law doesn't really protect them too much. Although, India is a very crowded country, as you see, and you go and stick a whole bunch of adult bulls in must in here for several hours, you're asking for trouble. There is really no public safety at all, both for the elephants and for people. And what's taking the elephants out of the Indian jungles into captivity? It's a lot of habitat fragmentation, sadly, and encroachment, breaking up all of the corridors that these elephants need, and there's collateral damage. The crop defense is a huge problem. Villagers chase elephants, elephants chase villagers. Again, people get killed. 20% of elephants get killed because of crop defense. And electrocution, poisoning, explosives in the food, etc. Poaching and trade in body parts is a huge problem as well. Now, painful sights like this are really common. Calves are trapped in the wild illegally, and then fraudulently legitimized, so they become then legal animals in captivity, and they're claimed to be born from a captive cow, and then they are trained, the spirit is broken and they're trained. And elephant keepers, or mahouts as we call them, sadly they have no knowledge of any animal behavior, it's just handed down, and it's only intimidation and fear and pain that's used, outdated methods. So these are the management tools that they use to manage these elephants. Pathetic husbandry, completely unhygienic, really poor nutrition. So our quest in this journey, the success with the bears really encouraged us, and we just couldn't say no. So we basically rescued this elephant first, Champa, and this is the first time she ever got to a pool. She didn't come out for 8 hours when we put her in. And then we realized that there was so much that needed to be done about elephants. So this was our real test. Bola, who was hit by a truck again at about 2:30 a.m. or something like that. And then you can see the state of the truck. We went there, rescued him. We thought he was going to die. He wasn't going to make it. He had over 100 wounds on his body. He was a walking skeleton. And we had a huge battle ensued with the owners of the elephant, because he was smuggling the elephant with no paperwork at all across state borders. And when we arrested him, we managed to get the elephant on negligence. He fought like hell in court, and only because we were able to get the police to understand the situation, the forest department implemented the act immediately. And timely intervention sometimes is really important, and that is the only reason we were able to rescue this animal. And he's still in court trying to get back custody of this elephant. This is how Bola looks today, and you're all welcome to come and meet him. We also have a circus elephant campaign where we've rescued 5 out of 67 circus elephants across India. We have 62 more to go. And the final thing, I know we have just a few minutes left, so I'm going to share with you Raju's story. Some of you may have heard of Raju the elephant. And this was, it took us a year in just legal paperwork and court procedures to try and secure this. This is how Raju was just before we rescued him. And this is how he looks today. But I have a video that I'm going to share with you guys of the whole journey that we went with Raju. And it was really the court procedures. We still haven't been able to convict the owner, but it's going to take a long time for us to do that. So. You can see the glee on the mahout's face as he was beating this elephant. He just was a sadist. 50 years is how this elephant lived this way. He's been sold about 27 times to different people. Like all good rescues, again, in the middle of the night. We had about 70 policemen escort us out, and with 4 jeeps.
Raju the elephant lived shackled in captivity. He endured hunger and abuse and was in such a tormented state that when he was finally set free, the elephant was actually in tears.
So he was really popular. He went on CNN and stuff, and he really became a vehicle for us to try and create awareness about what elephants suffered across India. And you can see there were 7 chains, 2 spears, and all of these spiked. They were about 2 inches thick, and they were basically embedded in his leg when we found them. That's stuff from just one elephant. That's the management capability that they use. And they just spear him when they need him to move. And he was so scared when we got him. He was scared that we would take the water away because he was really quite deprived. He wouldn't let us take the bowl to refill it, so we had to keep bringing new bowls in, big bowls of water. These are the other elephants at the sanctuary that share the space with him. Chanchal and Lakshmi, you can go to the website and see more.
People who deal with captive elephants here, they justify almost every kind of cruelty that is practiced against captive elephants on the grounds of tradition.
So there was a story that Raju had killed about 5 people I wouldn't blame him. I would probably have killed 10 if I was in his place. But he just trusted us almost instinctively, almost immediately. We didn't know him at all, and they had tied him up and speared him and really agitated him. But he allowed us to treat him just like that, and we were not restraining him in any way whatsoever. We have a 215-acre forested patch right next to our facility in Mathura, which all of you must visit. And we get the elephants to go out there every morning and evening for a walk. So this is our herd going for a walk. For those of you who don't know what the rumbling means, it's just happiness and That's Lakshmi with the squiggly tail who has a special voice. Thank you.
I promised it would be amazing. That has to be one of the most hopeful presentations I've ever seen. Thank you both so much. We have plenty of time, thanks to your excellent work, for some questions, and I'm sure you have them. So why don't we start up front and we'll move our way back.
Yeah, so I was lucky enough to be in India this summer and to see the elephant sanctuary and the moon bear sanctuary, and then they were great. One of the questions I had, I was going to a trip to Agra to see the Taj Mahal. I know at one point there was an elephant there, maybe a few months before I went, and it actually hurt a bunch of people, and so it was no longer there. But you can't drive within a certain vicinity of the Taj Mahal just for kind of pollution and preservation purposes. So they have a lot of horses and camels, and I know just like the number of people that they carry and the carts that they carry. I was wondering if you could talk about whether those camels or horses fall under the WPA, because I'm not sure why they were still allowed to kind of be being used as kind of like transportation.
Everyone able to hear the question? Okay, great, go ahead.
So it's really unfortunate that those horses and camels and ponies are used extensively over there. And it's almost supposed to be a pollution-free area, so they use battery vehicles and, sadly, animal-drawn carts. I wish they would come under the Wildlife Protection Act, because then you could do a lot more with it. But sadly, they fall, because they're domestic animals, they go under the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act, and you saw how pathetic it was. The fines are less than $1. And so we have been trying to intervene. So we have a sister charity called Friendicos, which is a domestic animal organization, and it's been in existence for over 35 years. And so we've tried to set up a mobile clinic to try and first win the trust of the owners who use these horses and ponies, and those animals really have some very bad welfare, terrible farriery and lots of foot care issues. But I think it's going to be a while before we can, because the law just is not strong enough to just use the law. We've got to use other mechanisms, or we encourage the government to revise this law. So perhaps a recommendation from here could help.
I would love, Kartik, if you could address the market issues. We've heard about this earlier in plenary session, but bear paws, for instance, bear paw soup goes for like $1,000. I assume that's not just one paw in that soup. The current penalty in Oregon is $5,000 for the taking of a bear. So we've heard about, okay, if we decrease the product, obviously the price is going to go up. What are your thoughts on how we address the issue?
Well, if you decrease the product, the price might go up. If you increase the product, the price isn't going to go up. I mean, it's not going to make a difference, because in China, I think there are 16,000 tigers in captive tiger breeding facilities only for harvest. But I think they have 400 tiger breeding facilities or something like that, or 390 or something. And it's not going to change, because people still want, and they think a wild caught tiger's penis or paws or anything else has more virility than, because it's used as an aphrodisiac preparation, than a captive-born tiger. So I don't think adding supply would make an impact, but I think punishing the people would certainly. So everybody who's related to that crime, so that way the Wildlife Protection Act is quite good if it was implemented better. So maybe something similar could be used over here if the law can be amended slightly, because not just the person who's selling or making the soup, for example, but everybody in that entire chain, including the person who sold it, the person who bought it, the person who transported it, the person who actually poached the animal, the fellow who went and showed the bear, etc. And if all of those 6 or 7 people could be tried and publicly, also make sure everybody knows about who was involved, I think that would probably make a difference in addressing market forces. So what we quite often do that. So when we had cubs, I mean, we were not able to rescue these cubs just because of our intelligence and our efforts. We had to use the law quite stringently. So if we got intelligence about a bear cub being trafficked by a community or one person, we would make sure we arrested the man, got the police to do what they do with the arrestee before he's put into judicial custody. So he gets into judicial custody, and then we oppose bail constantly. So sometimes he can not get bail for up to 6 months. So and then he gets tried. So basically, it creates a good message in the community that this is not good. It really impacts you. Everybody gets to know about it, and then the whole community wants to back off. And then we're able to tell the community that, see, we're trying to help you guys with education, livelihoods, other forms of support. But if you keep doing this, it's not going to be possible. So we need a commitment from all of you that you will not do this again. And so we're able to actually negotiate with the community. And then after that, sometimes we're able to help them with bail as well. And then on the condition that he joins us, so he then quits this whole industry, joins us, comes to the right side of the law, and becomes an informer. So we give them protection money after that. We help him with medical insurance, salary, support for his children, etc. And then he knows the ropes already. And we get more intelligence, and he helps us trip up more wildlife criminals. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, it's very interesting.
Yes, right.
So also a kind of demand side question.
And speak up if you could.
Sure. The dancing bears that you rescued, if I understood correctly, the men who were holding those bears captive and forcing them to dance were in a very impoverished rural community. So what was the market? Like who was the audience, and who had the money to make that a viable livelihood?
So since it was a 400-year-old practice, basically it's been handed down from forefather to son and so on and so forth. And these people didn't know anything else, and they had no education on their side, and they also lived a very impoverished life. So their audience during the tourist season is about 5 months in India, really. And they would take all of these bears and move to areas where there was a high concentration of foreign tourists. And so a lot of tourists would think, oh, well, this is obviously visible in the public eye, so it must be permitted, or it must be a cultural thing in India. And so a lot of people would give them. Some people would actually give them $20 or $50 and say, please don't do this to the bear. Here's your money, but can you not make the bear perform? But it was not going to make any difference to him, because he saw that as a spike in his income. And then the rest of the year, because the bear is revered in India as, I don't know if you all know, there's a mythological story about how there was a bridge between India and Sri Lanka built by an army of bears and monkeys, and the leader was a bear. You've got to research it maybe. It's very interesting. So people believe that bears are like the lords of the underworld. And so children who have bedwetting issues and people who have nightmares all go and buy talismans with bear hair in it. So when there is no tourist season, these people, the Kalandar community, would have that nomadic life, going from village to village in rural areas and collecting money, collecting arms and selling talismans. They would cut off the digit of a bear or a claw and teeth and sell it off as well, and any other parts if they could, keeping the bear alive. And there have also been incidents of them going across to the Pakistan border and to the Nepal border and selling the bear off for it to be taken into either the bear baiting trade or other body part trade. So that was the audience. So rural communities, and even if he couldn't earn much money, he would get rice, flour and vegetables. that he would beg during the day, and people would give him because it's considered good to give alms in India. So which is why it wasn't a great life, but since they knew nothing else, they were scared to give this up and move on to something else. But there were some examples in the community of people who had their bears confiscated or who'd been arrested, and then they were forced to move on to other opportunities, and they'd become drivers or shop owners or little hotels or tea shops. So we tried to use that and when we did a needs assessment, we realized that the youngsters didn't want to continue this. They wanted to move on. They had dreams. They wanted to see themselves educated and doing other things. So we fed into that, and then that's how we were able to connect the dots and make that happen. Yes.
I have several questions.
One.
Am I only allowed one?
Well, we're running out of time, so
Okay.
I don't want to have to.
Okay, well then go to someone else, because I need to think about it.
Okay, she's going to pick her question. We have time for one other beyond that. Any other questions? I have one if no one else does, and it applies to both of our speakers. And the question would be, this is incredible work, and both of you need a livelihood as well and to fund this work. And I'm curious to know how you were able to provide for your habeas corpus work, Heron, and for the incredible examples that you gave us today, Kartik. Heron, how do you fund what you do?
You're asking for the habeas corpus?
Any of the work that you do, really. I'm just curious to know how it's supported financially.
Okay, very good question. I'm a professor and prosecutor. So, in the morning I'm a professor. In the afternoon I'm a prosecutor. So, it's a double function. And to finance the animal law review, is there a lot of things that you have to students to make educational program. One thing that I do in Brazil is when I sue up a criminal, an environmental criminal, is there in Brazil similar to the plea bargain, and I bargain with the criminal and the defendant, and they support an animal protection program. This is the source of my, even the animal right review. This is,
wow.
I take I interchange between the prosecution and the professor.
Excellent, excellent.
To be honest, I don't know how I raise the funds.
Really?
But, well, we don't have a organized fundraising mechanism yet. We are trying to get there. But I think we started Wildlife SOS in 1995, and it took us 3 years to actually pay for the registration costs of the charity, which was $250. Took us 3 years because we were doing all of this research as well. There have been days, we would have $2 in our pocket and we'd have to switch off the engine while going downhill to save gas and things like that. But going forward, I think when we started off, we realized that we just had to do this. There was no other way. Someone had to do this. And I think, I'm a firm believer of destiny and good karma. And, when you want to do something really badly, I think good energy comes back quite easily. So we had no computers, no way of contacting people. And people would just connect with us. They'd send us, checks in the mail saying, "Oh, I heard you want to do this," and move on. And that's how we started off. And then about 2006, we set up a 501c3 in the US, again, entirely manned by volunteers for 7 years. And we've just last year managed to take on some staff in the US as well. So it's been a long haul. I keep threatening my fundraising team, a communication team really, that if they can't raise enough money, I'll have to go rob a bank, and then they'll have to come bail me out. So they work hard.
And when you set your mind to something, you do it. So that's
yes, I think we absolutely. Well, not about the robbing the bank, but yes.
All right, just
I'm trying
clarifying.
to
This is a law conference. So.
Yes.
And I didn't want to hijack your opportunity
No,
to
it's
ask
okay.
the question,
So
Sarah.
I guess I'll ask Karan. So.